Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, July 22nd, 2020. Time for another show and another big day of interruptions here. 9:30 or so when we're scheduled for our first break. And who knows whether it will come before, during, or after. But around 9:30 or so, just to let everybody know, we have a delivery coming. It is large. I don't know how long it's going to take to get the thing in here. It's a piano. Well, I mentioned it the other day. The piano coming out of the in-laws' house, as everything is coming out of the in-laws' house, and finding homes elsewhere. The piano here in case any of us decide to take piano lessons, really. It's late in life, but what the hell? You know, my wife took piano lessons on this piano as a kid. It's got sentimental value. It's always nice to have a piano, and why not bang on it and make some noise? We'll do that today during the show, and I don't know, like I said, they could be, take them 15 minutes to get the thing in here and situated. I don't think they're planning on staying and playing a concerto, but who knows what could happen. I imagine they'll be in and out pretty quickly. And the value of moving the entire studio for the 5, perhaps 10 minutes that there's some racket in the background, I didn't think it was worth doing. And maybe we'll interview the piano movers. Who knows? It could be a very interesting story. I think we'll largely ignore them. We have plenty to focus on here in the news from yesterday. We didn't have a live show yesterday, but I think our show was pretty up to date. We recorded it on Monday night, so it was pretty clear what was going to be in the news on Tuesday. But we couldn't anticipate everything. There was a press conference yesterday. We knew that was going to happen. Trump said he was going to resume his press conferences. I don't know whether he was getting bored or someone told him that they were good or helpful in some way. I think he just needed something to do. And by all accounts, he got bored in the middle of this one, too, because I guess he was mostly overruled by staff who said, if you're going to do this thing, we'll give you a scripted piece of paper to read off of, and then you'll say boring things, and no one will notice that you're a terrible failure as a president, and everyone will love it. And in fact, he did, manage to extract at least from ABC News, and I think from some others who may or may not have hedged their bets later or retracted their statements, but I did see the responses, which I think is what the staff was after. Reviews that, again, he didn't ad-lib things for the most part, and he didn't go crazy and yell at people and try to blame everything on Obama or sleepy Joe Biden or whatever. And so it was boring and, if not quite presidential, not really particularly, didn't raise any eyebrows. So he got all sorts of good reviews initially in terms of he's very presidential. A new tone had been adopted. He was very serious and had finally evidence that he was willing to accept the gravity of the situation. Except we've actually had these headlines about coronavirus before. In March, there was a time when he looked to have been convinced of the seriousness of the situation, and that usually goes away pretty quickly. And I think it's gone already. Meanwhile, he undermined himself. People who are actually paying attention to the thing say that, I don't know how it happened. I think he was asked a question directly about it, but he veered off into well wishes for Ghislaine Maxwell, who, of course, is in jail awaiting trial right now on her participation in a massive international pedophilia ring and sex trafficking ring. And as presidents do, they offer their best wishes to people facing trials in life. And apparently he thought that was a fine idea. There was a way to deal with the situation, of course, without stepping in another huge open bear trap and just saying, hey, I don't comment on ongoing cases. It sounds like they have a real live one there. And whatever. I guess if there are any good wishes, it's for the prosecutors and the courts to sort this thing out correctly. And he tried to play it off like he kind of only sort of tangentially knew her. There's dozens of pictures of them together. They live very close together, both in New York and in Florida. The idea that what did he say? I guess they lived in Palm Beach, and I might have run into him a few times in Palm Beach. We all know the backstory on that. We can fill in the blanks, though, and remind you all about it. I'm sure we'll talk about that and other things when Greg Dworkin comes around. But as for now, Daily Coast Radio is live. I'm duty-bound to inform you, as Bill has informed the rest of you from Portland, Maine, not the Portland under siege in Oregon. Breaking news from ABC. Kagro X, that's me, David Waldman, is displaying a new tone. There we go. And we'll display, I think, 88 new tones shortly here on the show. And a new level of engagement after aides and allies pleaded with him to recognize the gravity of the moment and do more armpit farts on the air. That is a great idea. We haven't had enough of those. There was a time when I could do them both lefty and righty. I don't know if that's the case anymore. Getting older and near armpit fart retirement age, I think. But we could give it a shot. There's a shirt in the way, so that makes things tough. And I guess I could, I like the old summer camp. I got summer camp hair. It could work out just fine. But I'll have to stretch the neck of the shirt out, and we're going to make a mess of things. So instead, we'll turn to Greg Dworkin, who has considerably more dignified things to say, I think, although maybe the topics aren't
I'm here
that
so you
dignified.
don't have to. There's no question about that.
Excellent. Right. Well... That's right.
I'm going to save you from yourself.
Just like reading, we read it so you didn't have to. Greg is
My little
here
brother
to
was
the
going to
radio.
go do this thing, and I had to do an intervention.
Right. So, okay. Well, I did have a little bit of news probably lined up somewhere, but Bill's suggestion sounded a lot better suddenly. But, okay, we'll turn to the rest
That's what
of
I
the
was
news.
afraid of. That's
Yeah.
why I signed in right now.
Oh, my God. Did he just say? It's like a dump button on the radio, except we don't have that. But, all right. Good morning, Greg. How are you?
Hey, good morning. How are you?
Fine.
I watched the Trump press conference.
Okay, good. So I didn't have to. That's good.
So you didn't have to. It's pretty easy to summarize. Basically, he read from a piece of paper, he hated it, and then he said he was done.
Okay.
Oh, but by the way,
that is boring.
He still found time
Yes.
to, in addition to reading from a piece of paper and obviously being bored and kind of hostage forced to do this.
Yeah.
He still found time to wish Ghislaine Maxwell, apparently the S is silent, just so you know, not spill the beans.
Okay.
I wish you well. I knew her, sort of, kind of, maybe, hope nothing bad happens to you.
Yeah. Well, right. Wink, wink.
So if I were you, I'd kind of be quiet.
Yeah, there is that. Yeah, I mean, she can certainly sink him. I guess if anyone, who knows? His followers will be like, she's lying.
Video.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens. I guess
We'll see what happens. Meanwhile,
Jeffrey Epstein didn't make it.
Sam Stein pulled an April Fool's.
Oh,
yeah, he pulled out this story from April.
April.
Trump literally laughed at how he can game the press.
Well, sure, I would.
Right? Trump is deliberately flooding the zone with coronavirus briefing, and he's privately mused about how easy it is to get the press to praise his, quote, new tone. That was from April.
Oh, because he did it in March. He got a new tone favorability rating, I think, on like March 17th or so. And then, so what in April?
I think March was Pantone, but this particular
that's his face.
Idea of somehow or other he's made that pivot, it actually didn't really work. It lasted for about 15 minutes, and even the reporters who like to say those things got bored.
Okay, well that's good. I don't know how long.
And then
it took ABC
this morning they noted, as far as that new tone goes, it's notable that there's no coronavirus stuff on his agenda for the next 6 years.
Yeah, bored again. And
not on the schedule.
Out.
What is on the schedule is doubling and tripling down on making war on the wall of moms in Portland.
Okay. So
he's going to be, trying to do this. Now, Ron Brownstein has already noted that this isn't, Nixon's America anymore, and this is already lost. But he's going to do it anyway because, he doesn't get it. So let's look at some polling that's come out, and then we'll look at some pandemic numbers, which unfortunately have also come out. So coronavirus government response. This is Civics. How satisfied are you with the U.S. government's current response to the coronavirus outbreak? It's down to minus 28, which is a new record low for them. So people, for the most part, are looking at what's going on, and they're not real happy about it.
Okay.
I just thought I would mention that. Okay, Nick Gorovich, it's Wednesday, so that means Navigator survey polls come out.
Yeah, right.
3/4 of voters now say the country is off on the wrong track, a metric of pessimism that keeps ticking up, and a majority of GOP voters feel this too.
Okay.
So headed in the right direction, a new low of 19. Headed in the wrong direction, a new high of 75, up from 70 last week.
Ooh. Yeah, that seems like the number there is larger, this is my analysis, than the other number. Thank you. Pretty good, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Trump's approvals remain in perilous territory. Okay.
Yes.
Hitting
gotcha.
61% disapprove overall and on the pandemic. Pandemic approval by party reveals massive intensity gap. The Democratic voters, 5% approve, 95% disapprove, and 87% strongly.
Yes. This is not of the pandemic, but of his handling of the pandemic? Or are we
Pandemic
actually rating the
approval by party.
pandemic?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's his handling of it.
Got
GOP
it.
voters,
Makes
81%
sense.
approval. They love the pandemic. 81% approval, 17%
Hooray.
disapprove, and only 43% strongly approve of Trump's handling of this. Okay.
All
And by
right.
the way, when you look at health care,
I will.
approve 39, disapprove 58. Don't forget, there's a lot of people that are going to be losing health care over this. On the economy, approve 44 for Trump, disapprove 53. He's -9 on the economy, the only thing that was helping him. But, of course, his lowest numbers are on events taking place after the death of George Floyd, protests specifically. 33% approve of what he's doing and 61% disapprove.
All right.
So that's just continuously dropped down. The more he threatens in Portland, the worse he does. Now, here's Trump's mask problem in a nutshell, says Nick Gorovich, the pollster. He's been totally out of step with the public. 81% of voters say they're pro-mask, and 70% of voters say Trump has generally been anti-mask.
Yes, he has.
Right? And what about his mask pivot?
Yeah.
The big pivot we saw yesterday. Voters seeing right through it. We showed respondents a picture of Trump wearing a mask. 57% of voters said they'd seen the photo. 64% said he was far too late.
Yes, true. Right.
Right?
I agree with that.
Some have asked whether there's a social desirability effect at play in polling on masks. So we tried asking another way. Is there too much shaming of people for not wearing masks? Well, 75% say those who don't wear masks deserve to be called out, and only 25% say too much shaming.
So
if you're banking on cancel culture there, nah, it's not working for you.
Okay. Right. Well, it won't save you. People want some safety.
Here's something else that hasn't worked out. Trump's attacks on Fauci haven't worked out. Fauci has a 69% favorable rating, including 51% with Republicans. Voters trust Fauci over Trump on reopening decision 61-23. And yesterday, Birx and Fauci weren't in the room. Fauci said he wasn't invited. Birx was left outside.
Okay.
According
with
to
a bowl
Trump.
of water.
Trump said, "Oh yeah, she's right outside the room.
Okay.
That's why she's not here."
That's it. I guess
Somebody
that's
asked him, "How come she's not here?" Well, she's right outside. Well,
Outside
that
the room.
doesn't explain why she's not here. Why isn't she inside?
Nah, you have to fact check that. Was she? Did she have an ankle monitor?
I don't know.
Probably not. It's in the scarf.
I'm not making any scarf jokes.
Oh. Okay, I didn't either. You didn't hear that.
Trump's
here.
disapproval on the schools issue is growing to 61% from 56%. This is important because this is the driving thing between now and the fall.
Yes, I have school news.
Parents at 37% approve, 56% disapprove. That's up from 51% last week. And there's a theme in our data today, which is that pretty much everything Trump is doing is not working.
All right.
In terms of general support for reopening schools, the data similar to last week that the percentage opposing reopening school ticked up a couple of points, both overall and with parents. And high infection states are opposed by a 19-point margin.
Okay, that makes sense. People are paying attention to the news,
Right.
and that's good.
Republicans, of course, are in support of opening schools and opposed. Support is 61 and opposes 33, but overall it's 38-53.
Okay.
Parents 40-54. So 2% of parents compared to overall say, look, I love my kids, but get them out of the house.
Yeah. Well, some people probably, live where it's low incidence.
Well, in the rest of the country that's not high infection state, it's 40-52. High infection states is 36-55.
There you go.
Now,
Again,
the
makes
top
sense.
concern about Trump's handling of the pandemic continues to be his ignoring of experts and downplaying of the threat. and stepping away from the poll. This is the last slide on this particular poll I'm going to go over.
All right.
But it's crystal clear. If you want to get political support for what you're doing, get your public health people to be the experts talking about it. If you're not doing that, then nobody's going to pay attention to you because they all realize that politicians are full of it and they don't really know what they're talking about. Yes. Politicians don't realize it. They think they're supposed to be leading on this. That leading on this is exactly where you don't want them because now everything they say is going to be political.
Yeah.
That's not what you want. But we knew that from the beginning. We told them that from the beginning. Of course, they didn't listen to us.
I read articles about it.
The top concern about Trump's handling of the pandemic continues to be his ignoring of experts and downplaying of the threat. These were on full display yesterday as he restarted his briefings. Fauci's not there. Trump repeats that the virus will disappear. People just aren't buying it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
and it's interesting, so in trying to pivot, Trump is doing all the wrong things. The latest thing he's doing, as far as I could tell, there's this guy we talked about on the show before. There's one of those Fox News doctors, the ones who are paid to be morons. In this particular case, it's Mark Siegel, who's been on Fox for a very long time, so long that I remember him back in 2007, 2008, writing books about how the only problem with bird flu is fear, and this is a fear epidemic, and anybody trying to actually prepare for a pandemic is just feeding into that fear, and the best thing you can do is ignore the experts who are trying to prepare for this because fear is the problem. He wrote a series of books on that, at least 3. And then he revised the latest one saying, given the coronavirus, let's talk about fear again.
All right.
It's not really a problem. The problem is fear. So basically he's an idiot. So why is that important? It's important because he's going to be interviewing Trump today about the response to the pandemic. And let's just say it's one of those super softball favorable situations. Yeah, sure. I think he's already interviewed some HHS people about what a wonderful job the federal government has done on this so far with,
Okay, so
upwards of 100 and how many deaths? I mean, it's just hard to count anymore.
Nearing 145,000.
Right, way over 140,000. So, great job.
Yes.
Heck of a job, Brownie kind of stuff.
Right. RNG.
Right. Now, Morning Consult comes out Wednesday, too. Bipartisan majority supports statewide mask mandates, poll finds. The broad approval comes as statewide mask mandates aimed at stopping the spread of coronavirus are under effect in more than half of U.S. states. It's places like Florida and Arizona that people refuse to do that is part of the problem. But don't forget, right behind those, big states, California, which will do something like that, Florida, Arizona, Texas, there's Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, South Carolina. Those 4 states are having more cases per capita than Texas, than Georgia, and they're right up there with Arizona, way more than California.
Yeah, when I had the patience to calculate those new cases each day per capita, those were the up and comers, and eventually they were smaller in population, which is what drove it. But eventually they would catch up, and a good chart like yours shows that there's more than as I saw your chart tweeting around this morning, more than the big 4, and you should keep an eye on them because there's more states than those 4. You
right.
might even live in them.
And they're going to include Idaho, Tennessee, so they're going to be the up-and-comers in addition to Georgia. So definitely something to keep an eye on. But in the meantime, going back to Morning Consult, the poll found 53% of registered voters polled favor statewide mask mandates that are punishable by fine or jail time. In addition to the 86% of Democrats, both Republican and Independent respondents expressed majority support for requiring face masks to be worn in public. 68% of independents polled and 58% of Republicans supported the mask mandate. So when the governors come out and say, we can't do this, no, actually you can.
Yeah, you got the support to do it. You just won't. Yeah, it's pretty sad. I saw that the Winn-Dixie supermarket chain is now leaning towards saying, it will be the supermarket you can go to here in the Deep South that we won't require masks. So
for now.
That's where you'll go to get sick. If there's anyone working.
But that's exactly right. When things start getting worse, that will change. It's just that I don't get this.
You keep saying it.
It's going to change. They're going to be forced to change. I don't understand why they don't see that.
I don't know. Or maybe they're just tired of being in business and they'd like to get out.
Right.
Could
Meanwhile,
just quit.
another slew of polls came out today looking at things like presidential approval and the general election, and there are some interesting ones. Morning Consult, as I mentioned, that has Biden +7 at 47.40, and Ipsos, even more interestingly, has Biden up 46.38. That's a +8. But why is that interesting? First of all, one of the reasons that it's interesting is that they have a relatively large number of undecideds. They have 16% undecided. And here's the interesting part about that. The July 15th through 21st poll found 46% of registered voters said they'd back Biden, 38% would back Trump. The remaining 16% are either undecided, plan to support third party, or may not vote. Both Biden and Trump campaigns have focused much of their time on reaching out to this third group of potentially persuadable voters. And 16% is a big chunk, so no, everybody hasn't made up their mind. Well, of course, we've been talking about that for a year. You know where I come from on that. There are persuadable voters, and it's definitely worth going after, which could swing a close election in either direction. Reuters Ipsos polling in 2016 found that support was evenly split that summer between Trump and the then Democratic nominee Hillary Clinton, and on Election Day, Trump won a majority of voters who said they decided in the final week. That was because of Comey, by the way. This year,
Comey virus.
There is no Comey. This year, the poll found that 61% of undecided or third-party registered voters said they'd support Biden if they had to choose, and 39% would vote for Trump. 70% of undecided or third-party registered voters say they disapprove of Trump's performance, and the same number, 70, said they think the country's headed in the wrong track, and 62% said they thought the U.S. economy was headed in the wrong direction. And this group also appears to be, the undecideds, deeply concerned about the novel coronavirus, which has killed more than 141,000 Americans, actually up to 145, as you said, and forced millions out of work as businesses closed in an effort to slow the spread of the virus. 8 in 10 say they were personally concerned. And when asked about the most important factor driving their decision to vote, 34%, a plurality, said they're looking for a candidate who has a robust plan to help the nation recover.
Okay. Yes,
so
that would be logical.
The point is that the coronavirus is dominating everything politically, and every analyst who doesn't understand this or hasn't figured this in or says, well, setting the pandemic aside, this is where things would stand, and that's why it's going to tighten up. It's just stupid.
Yes, minus
you
voting.
You have to be not paying attention to actually get that.
Yeah. Well, you again, as usual, make the point daily, and it needs to be made daily. This is the agenda. This is the topic. It cannot be escaped. You can try and run away from it for a few minutes, but
you can run, but you can't hide.
Yeah,
Let me show you how bad it is.
The more angry you make people, saying, "Come back to the virus." Yes.
Right. For Trump. Okay, this is Rasmussen polling.
Oh, they're great.
Yeah. Who do they tend to favor?
Republicans.
Well, they have Pennsylvania, Biden +5, and Ohio, Biden +4.
Okay. Oh, I know how.
That's the second Ohio poll in 2 days that has Biden up 4 points.
Oh, all right, Ohio.
Which, by the way, lends itself to another question. Maybe we'll have time to do that before the break. And that is, why the heck are they asking John Kasich to talk at the Democratic convention, and who's mad about it?
Okay. Yeah, Ohio, right.
Okay, so this is Jonathan Chait. We haven't heard from him in a while. Why is the left angry at Republicans working to elect Joe Biden? So now you have the whole bigger theme of people are mad at the Lincoln Project. They think they're subversive. They're Trojan horses. They're going to get your money, and then they're going to run against Democrats, even though they've committed to running against Republicans. So people are furious. And as Chait says, it's no surprise conservatives are furious. But why are liberals furious?
Yeah.
And why are they so mad that they're going to ask John Kasich?
Yeah.
Well, because Kasich doesn't represent a lot of what Democrats stand for. But so what? This is an election.
Yeah. He's a specialty player here.
He's a niche player, you know? He's like Joe Lieberman speaking at the Republican convention.
Yeah.
Does it really make a difference? No.
We're okay with it.
But, you know, why are they doing that? Well, because he's good friends with John McCain. And just like everybody in the Democratic Party said, oh, what a pain in the butt Holy Joe is. But, okay, I get it. I understand why he's speaking. Let's just make sure that his influence is limited as we go forward. That's all.
Yeah, I'm not that disturbed about it. There's limited time.
But
at
people
the convention,
are. There are people like they're apoplectic about it.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of terrible things about John Kasich.
Why didn't you ask Nina
We
Turner?
can talk about them. Well, I don't know. What does she do for Ohio?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. I mean, it might work, it might not work. I'm not that worried about it. People speak at conventions who are terrible all the time.
All the time. It's part of it. And besides, nobody's going to be there.
Or watch, honestly.
Or watch. So what difference does it make?
So, yeah, all right.
Chill out.
They make good points, but I'm not going to change the strategy. I'm not going to. They're not going to ask me. But yes, I'm with you on that. It's going to happen, and then some people will be angry. Then what? Then do the right thing. Vote well.
Yeah, these things happen.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's a possibility. The Lincoln Project thing, I will say this. You don't have to give them money. Don't. That would be a great way of it. Oh, my gosh, for free, they're making all these anti-Trump commercials. I guess I'll take that for what it's worth and also not give them money or appoint any of them to federal office if Biden were to win. That would be a great.
I was just peeking at the Real Clear Politics summary of state polling. It's not as good as, but easier to find than the 538 summary.
Huh. Okay.
State by state, and I can go to The Economist and find it there. But The Economist does a who do we think is going to win, which is not quite the same as a polling summary.
Yes.
So, and they generally base it on their own YouGov stuff rather than looking at the polls at large. So I was peeking at the Biden versus Trump, which maybe has changed a point in Trump's favor over the last week. Not any significant information in there because the polls do have a 1 point or 2 point variability from week to week. But they used to have this little setup that said, click here and you can look at the individual states. You could look at Ohio, you could look at this, you could look at Wisconsin. And now there's so many states that are battlegrounds, they just have a top battleground.
Oh, all right. Too confusing to call all the states out that are. Well, that's good.
It wouldn't fit. All the states that are now battlegrounds wouldn't fit. So now it's Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Florida, and Arizona. Biden wins by 5.3 if you add them all up, and he wins in each one of those.
Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday. But our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. All right, welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio, where, I guess I've been shopping for masks more than you. I guess you've been shopping for chicken dinners on your computer. The advertising is driven by what you, I guess, have been reading about, searching about. They're trying to catch your eye, catch your interest. I'm looking at the Real Clear Politics
I had dinner delivered
page.
last night.
Okay, that must be it. One of the most bizarre-looking mask situations I've ever seen. I'll have to take a screenshot of this thing. So there's no way of describing it. But I didn't want to get too distracted, but I thought there was a possibility you might see this thing and get a good laugh out of it. But we'll put it away for later. I would say some sort of futuristic thing. I guess this is for people who don't like tying their masks on or using ear loops either. And these things, it looks like they take glasses frames, but they don't put any lenses in them. And then there's a bridge that comes down from the nose of the glasses and then widens into a sort of a molded plastic mask. I
think I saw that in The Jerk with Steve Martin, and eventually those guys are going to get sued.
That's true. And I wish Carl Reiner had lived to see it. He was the inventor or the guy who sued, right?
Yeah.
So
Carl Reiner was the guy
too
that
bad he
sued,
missed
he could cross his eyes.
Steve
Martin, by the way, is an incredible banjo player, and one of the things I've been including when I come across his pieces that he's doing for us now that we're all locked down is, he did a fundraiser with the Philadelphia Orchestra called Office Supplies. He did a bunch of individual banjo tunes, which are just great. So Steve Martin's still around.
All right. Well, yes, I hadn't heard anything to the contrary, but yeah, I've seen the banjo videos. He was a ukulele player in the movie, right? So, or one of his many hobbies.
Well, he's a string player, a generic string player.
Yes, well, that's true. All right, people get into that.
Yeah, well, the tuning is different though for the different instruments.
It's
so,
true.
If you play the guitar, but then just want a fake banjo, what you could do is you can tune your banjo like it's a guitar, at least until you learn. So there's all these little tricks you can do that nobody knows.
Yeah. Well, my son likes jumping around on those instruments.
Well, now he'll just have to retune the piano so it sounds like a banjo.
That comes next. Right. Okay.
But not till it arrives. It's going to arrive soon. So anyway, looking at these polls here, and there's really no difference between these numbers, but it's just fascinating to me that of the states that are most likely to go Biden based on polling numbers alone, Michigan is a Biden 7.7 lead. Not surprising there. And then it's followed by Pennsylvania, 6.6. And then the next state isn't Wisconsin, it's Florida, 6.4. Then Wisconsin, 6. Followed behind them by Arizona, 2.8 for Biden. And then North Carolina, 2.0. And again, North Carolina is just so stubborn.
Well, I have no reason for that, but okay.
But, hey,
if
Ohio's in play, if Texas is in play, if Georgia's in play, you know what else is in play?
It should be North Carolina.
Kansas.
But okay. Kansas, really?
What's the matter with Kansas?
I thought
Here's
we were done
Josh
with them.
Krashauer's piece today in National Journal. What's the matter with Republicans in Kansas?
He's getting very specific.
Yeah.
Okay.
Democrats are spending big in the state Senate race to help Republican hardliner Kris Kobach. GOP groups, Kobach? Did we ever decide how his name shouldn't be pronounced?
No. I don't think we ever landed on it. But yeah, we know him. The evil, terrible voter fraud guy.
Yeah. Kobach spit on the ground.
Right.
GOP groups aren't showing the same level of urgency, so there's a big Democratic PAC, which is trying to get Kris Kobach to beat his moderate Republican rival, Roger Marshall.
Is he moderate? Really?
Compared to Kobach.
Okay. All right.
Relative moderate. Who toppled a hardline member of Congress in a primary to get elected in 2016, but he can't raise any money.
Oh.
So the Democrats
good.
have something called the Sunflower State Super PAC, and they went up with $2.3 million in ads against Marshall, who doesn't have any money, emerging as the largest single spender in the Republican primary contest. One of the two ads called Marshall a phony who's soft on Trump and weak on immigration. While referencing Kobach's support of a border wall, the second one portrays Marshall as a swamp creature who took money from opioid manufacturers.
Oh, my. Well,
so the well-funded anti-Marshall blitz threatens to complicate the congressman's path to the nomination, writes Josh Krashauer. Until recently, Marshall couldn't afford to go on the air, and his main support came from a super PAC aligned with the GOP Senate Leadership Fund, but they don't want to throw in a lot of money because Marshall himself can't raise money, so they don't quite know what to do. They just hope Marshall wins without having to pay for him, because Marshall will be the next senator. Pat Roberts is retiring, I guess.
Okay, yes.
And
I guess so.
If Marshall wins, he wins. But if Kobach wins, it's not clear. Meanwhile, the Democratic nominee, State Senator Barbara Bollier, is racking up big bucks and courting Republican moderates.
Yeah.
And internal Republican polling shows the president has lost considerable ground in Kansas, a state he won with 57% of the vote in 2016. One operative involved in the Senate said Trump is only up narrowly, which has had a trickle-down effect. Down ballot, a Republican candidate in the GOP-friendly 2nd District, State Treasurer Jake LaTurner, released an internal poll this week showing him leading the Democrat by 1 point. This is in a district that Trump carried by 19.
Yeah.
And Shari Stavins comfortably won the suburban 3rd.
Right.
So she's not going to have any trouble. And given the slippage, Republicans expect the general election to be unusually competitive, regardless of the GOP nominee. And if Kobach emerges, Republicans fret the race would be close to a lost cause. With 2 weeks to go, it's surprising there isn't more GOP urgency to rally around their most electable candidate. So down ballot matters. All this stuff that Trump is doing matters. He doesn't care. Yeah. He really could care less or could care more or however you want to phrase it.
Yes.
If it turns out I'm old, so could care less is the expression I'm used to.
Yeah.
But if the Republicans lose the Senate and lose more seats in the House, but he wins,
Great.
he could care less.
Yeah, I guess. He's just, he doesn't know what goes on there anyway. But, Kansas is, all right, that's
He
great.
should,
I'm
because
glad they're in
the
eruption.
Democrats win the Senate
but
and he wins the White House. Highly unlikely. But should that unlikely thing happen, he gets impeached and removed.
Yeah. Well, we think so. I mean, it still takes, a large vote to remove him. But I don't know.
There's no incentive to support him anymore, though.
Yeah, that's true. Well, maybe they would find reason to be done with him. I don't know. It's a very weird dynamic. That would be the worst, though. Wouldn't that be horrible? I don't even want to. I don't want to contemplate it. But all right, Kansas, you're on my radar now. And Kris Kobach. It's kind of amazing that he hasn't been able to. His whole plan was to rally his stridency into the Republican nomination, and it might just not work. They might be sick of it out there.
Exactly. Everything that Trump does might just not work.
Yes,
this is New York Times. High voter turnout and record fundraising give Democrats hope for November. Despite a disjointed primary season and the challenges of holding elections during a pandemic, the party's seeing a surge in energy among voters. Yeah. And then they go ahead and list the challenges.
Oh.
Voting Rights Act issues, voter suppression, the pandemic, and yet overall turnout among voters casting ballots for Democratic presidential candidates so far this year has already surpassed primary season in 2016, as did fundraising between April and June. Democrats are nearing the record numbers set in 2008 in both counts, even though the marquee 2020 race largely ended in March. And, of course, it ended with generic Democrat winning.
Yeah.
Uncle Joe Biden.
He's the most generic of all.
Yeah, who's, by the way, going to be talking with Obama with proper social distancing. They're already putting an ad out showing Uncle Joe getting ready to go to the place that he's going to meet Obama. They're like a football field apart inside, just the two of them. But the point is Biden's wearing a mask as he gets out of the car, as he walks to the place that he's going to be meeting with Obama.
Oh, is that what
really well done, and sort of subtly, emphasizing a point.
Okay, excellent. A good point. I hope that they should get some cans and string and talk that way.
Right, and here's the fun part about this New York Times article. There's ample evidence of enthusiasm among the Republican base.
Enthusiasms.
That's what's there. All right.
I see. You see how I professionally pause so David could play that?
Yes, thank you.
Despite President Trump's lack of a serious and that's for those of you who think we do too much crosstalk. Despite President Trump's lack of serious challenger within the party, more than 14 million people have voted in Republican primaries, according to data from the Associated Press, and that's nearing the 18 million ballots cast in the contested 2012 election.
Okay.
It outpaces turnout in 2004, the last time there was a Republican incumbent.
Yes, I remember that year.
And the point is, with all of that enthusiasm.
No.
Enthusiasms.
I should hit the wrong button on purpose. All right.
The Democrats are still clobbering them.
Yeah. I could hit it on now.
Well, what the hell is supposed to do, you moron?
I could use that.
That fits. That fits really well, as a matter of fact.
Not too bad. Okay.
Right. Georgia, one of the few states to mail ballot applications to all its registered voters, saw nearly 1.3 million people vote in its Democratic presidential and Senate primary in June, even though Bernie Sanders had already dropped out. It was a 68% increase in turnout from 2016 and a 20% increase over 2008. 2008 was a big year.
Yeah.
So absentee ballots here are helping Democrats because everything that you do to help people vote is going to help Democrats this year at least. That's not always true. Mail-in ballots typically are nonpartisan. Helps in some states like Florida for Republicans, but for Trump to talk them down and say they're not good is just nutso on his part because it's hurting his own people.
A lot of writing about that, and we've kind of mostly skipped those articles. But yeah, there are Republican chairs in Republican states that are tearing their hair out because they've invested a lot of money in pushing people to get their absentee ballots so that they can win their states. And Trump is teaching them somehow that it's subject to fraud. I don't know why they suspect themselves of fraud. Well, I mean, besides the fact that they're guilty of fraud. But yeah, there's a lot of, a subject for another day, but it is kind of crazy, and they're going bananas trying to rehabilitate the image of the program they've already spent millions on. So
Right.
that's dumb.
I have a nice picture here of Giants manager, the San Francisco Giants baseball club.
Oh, okay.
Giants manager Gabe Kapler, among others, kneel during the national anthem. So Trump's not getting his wish.
Yes, I saw that picture. I wasn't aware of who I was looking at, but yeah, okay.
Which is always nice.
Yeah,
And Maggie
fire
Kurth,
'em, throw 'em
538, writes, every decision is a risk. Every risk is a decision. This is what I'm going to conclude today's segment on. You can't live like we did before coronavirus. We won't live like we did immediately after it appeared. Basically, everything is different. It affects every aspect of our life, and that's why, of course, it's going to affect politics as well.
Well, sure.
Right? In a pandemic that's been filled with unanswerable questions and unwinnable wars, this is our daily Kobayashi Maru.
Oh, okay. Little Star Trek.
Little Star Trek there. That's where James Kirk cheated in order to advance. And no one could tell us exactly what we ought to do. That was his exam at Starfleet Academy, I think, if I recall correctly.
You do, I think.
And Spock was his instructor, and still can't believe that Kirk cheated and got away with it. But, of course, he's not allowed to show emotion.
Right. So that's one of the drawbacks.
Yeah.
Well,
Kirk knew that, so that's part of the deal. Not that there haven't been attempts at providing structure. Right now, you can go online and find multiple charts that will visually categorize what were once the activities of daily life by risk level. Some of the charts are evidence-based, compiled by experts, and in my opinion, genuinely helpful. I particularly like the one designed by epidemiologist Saskia Popesso and bioethicist Ezekiel Emanuel.
Oh, yeah.
Because it lays out not just the risk levels of various behaviors, getting a haircut, visiting the dentist, buying a new shirt, but also the underlying factors that can make an activity more or less risky. In general, research has shown that indoors is riskier than outside, long visits riskier than short ones, crowds riskier than individuals. And look, just avoid situations where you're being sneezed, yelled, coughed, or sung at.
Yeah, I have seen this index, and there were some people who were nitpicking, why is this one orange when it should be yellow? But I get you.
Yeah, but on the whole, all of that is true.
Right.
And,
Part.
all I can say is, I wish her well on Ghislaine Maxwell.
Yes. I guess that's what we're all supposed to be doing, maybe. I got a note on the pronunciation saying that among French Canadians, where it's a popular name, it's Ghislaine. But I'm not certain where the emphasis falls. But this one, this pronunciation has the S in it. No? All right. Well, we have to do things her way. Otherwise, we'll all be, I don't know what. She pronounces it without an S in there?
Yeah.
And is it a hard G or a...
Ghislaine.
Ghislaine?
Yeah.
Oh. Well, I'll have to think about whether or not I want to do it her way or not. But Ghislaine...
Well, I'm not doing anything her way.
Yeah, right. I'm just kind of...
Just as a matter of principle.
Okay, yeah.
Anyway.
In that case...
But Wesley Asted, the New York Times reporter, Stedman,
what?
points out, if you can, you never want to involve yourself in the child sex ring news cycle.
That's a tough cycle, to be sure.
It's just like a general, pro tip.
Yeah, don't even, really, honestly, if you can be connected in any tangential way, don't say any of the words involved in that. Don't say ring.
Right. Don't bring up Jeffrey Epstein.
Child.
Don't bring up Maxwell. Don't say you were related, you know her. Any of that's just don't.
Yeah, and he can't escape from connection with her, but he can do more to... I'll
Here's
stop.
two polls that are definitely worth debating.
Yes.
Oh. Okay. One is from the Washington Post. The other is Wall Street Journal.
All right.
Washington Post. Americans support Black Lives Matter, but resist shifts of police funds or removal of statues of Confederate generals or presidents who were enslavers.
They do.
Q poll says that the people are majority of getting rid of the Confederate generals, but a lot of other polls say not so much. Majority of Americans support Black Lives Matter movement. A record 69% say black people and other minorities are not treated as equal to white people in the criminal justice system. But the public generally opposes calls to shift some police funding to social services or remove statues of Confederate generals. These findings underscore the mixed fallout after the brutal killing of George Floyd. Wall Street Journal says poll shows most voters agree black Hispanic Americans face discrimination, perceptions that minorities face racial... Oh, your piano's here.
Yeah.
Abby says.
I'm looking. I don't see it, but does she play is the question. That's
it's
on.
the 9:45 Wednesday garbage
Yeah.
report.
Oh, okay. Well,
Perceptions that
keeping your
minorities
garbage?
face racial discrimination hits new highs. The funny thing is,
yes.
if you look at both of these polls together, there's no question everybody agrees blacks are discriminated against.
All right, well, they all agree on that one.
There are arguments about
see
what
how
to
they
do
get on.
about it.
Yeah, including whether or not statues are going to help.
And,
I suppose
there are arguments by party. Democrats think one thing and Republicans
Hmm.
have a different solution. That's okay. That's normal. That's not surprising. I think that the bigger implication there is everybody finally agrees on what the problem is. Now we can argue about solutions and then say, okay, vote for me and my solution's better.
Yeah, I don't see.
They have a different solution. Mine is better. Vote for me. But even they agree it's the problem. Right? They used to say it's not
That's
even
true.
a problem. We're beyond that. Everybody agrees.
That's the
it's
most
a problem.
important takeaway. At least we have that. I mean, I don't think it's that hard to agree on the statues either. But I mean, that may change, and it may also be. Well, I don't think that you should pull them down yourself.
Right, and exactly as people have
Versus,
pointed out,
which I don't mind,
as a society in terms of change, American voters tend to be conservative, small c.
Yes.
As in, I didn't necessarily approve of that, but now that
Well,
it's here,
you
don't
think so.
change it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. They're slow to move.
That doesn't
slow
mean
to
you
change.
you do it anyway.
That means
And they
conservative.
go, okay, fine.
Yeah, that's true too. Now it's gone.
Now it's gone. Don't
You're
change
not going to
that.
pay to put it
Don't
back
put it
up.
back.
Right. We have
You saw that
gotten
with
rid
the
of
South
ours.
Carolina flag, right?
Yeah, and that's
you hate it.
kind of a lot of people point to that as being
With
the
Green
place it
Newsom,
started.
right?
Oh,
She took
yes,
it down.
I was
They're not
thinking
going to put
Green
it back.
Newsom, not
I didn't want you to go
Nikki
up there and
Haley.
take it down. And that was down. I don't want you to go back and put it
Right.
up.
Yeah, because that was the push. Put it back up. Well, it looks good
Yeah.
down.
Yeah, I don't like change.
Yeah, right. So she was the only true
Not there
conservative
anymore.
in
Leave it
that
alone.
situation. Right, true. We in Loudon County have gotten our Confederate statue that was in front of the courthouse gone, and we did it like the way the people in the poll would like. There was a big rally about it. Nobody pulled it down, but they said we're unhappy with having this thing here. A process
wait.
began, and it's been removed by actual authorities.
Wasn't that the Daughters of the American Revolution statue?
Yeah, or
They put
Daughters
it
of
up.
American Confederacy, I guess. But
They took it down.
yeah, we said, you know what? It's not really helping us here. Why don't you come and take your statue home with you? Well, we were given the space. Well, now you're not. Do you want the statue or should we throw it out? Oh, okay. Well, we'll pick it up and put it somewhere else. Okay, that's fine. Just come and get your stuff. You have until Thursday. Yeah,
well,
so
that's
it's
it.
gone. And Abby likes it, and maybe they'll put it in a statuary garden for her to check out in various ways that dogs do. That's probably
So
true.
anyway,
Okay.
that's it for me.
Very
I'll see you
good.
tomorrow.
Okay, we'll wait for our piano, and I'll tell you how it goes, and maybe we'll play it a little bit. We'll make it like Mr. Rogers. We'll play
We'll
piano
end
during the show.
This time I'm actually ending. I promise.
Okay.
This is Blake Hounshaw talking about the protest crowds in Portland continuing to grow in response to arrival of the feds because they now have the wall of moms. And I don't know if you saw it, but when they threw tear gas last night, a dad came out with a leaf blower and he blew it back.
Yes, I've seen that as a tactic. I didn't see it yesterday, but
So Blake Hounshaw says the iron law of protest dynamics, violent crackdowns bring out bigger, more mainstream crowds.
yes, that I saw.
Instead of the protesters and the Antifa people, now you have the moms and dads, and it's just growing. It's
Yeah.
not going to work, Mr. Trump.
Yeah, I thought that was well stated, and the fact that a more conservative or more mainstream crowd comes out, we've seen it. We've seen it before, and I guess iron law of it. I don't know how it compares in the United States if you federalize all sorts of weirdos and call them police, but it does work in other countries, and it's worked in our situation too. We're changing our situation is all. All right, I'll look for that tweet and include it. Thank you very much for.
Independent Roundup, and I'll make sure
Okay. Well, then
to
it'll
have
be
it.
easy to find. I got it then.
And
All right. You've got a lot of
things
demands
fall
on your
apart.
time.
So take care. I'll see you.
Very good. Talk to you tomorrow. No use in trying to keep you around for much longer if the phone's ringing and the dog's got to go. All right, there's the Blake Hound Show. Somewhere I got to find in my tweet stream here is I took the tweet or retweeted from Congresswoman Jennifer Wexton, our local representative here, taking note of the removal of the statue, but it's been buried under whatever her name is, Throat Warbler Mangrove Maxwell news from yesterday. But and all of my retweets of the various encounters. I was taken by, well, not by surprise, but I was certainly annoyed by the Trump effort to distance himself from her, because that was kind of ridiculous. But yeah, somewhere around here is I'll have to make it. Oh, there it is. Okay, Jennifer Wexton and her tweet. We'll put that in pocket so I have it to share with you. Empowering localities to remove Confederate monuments, she says, has been a priority of mine for years. Today, Leesburg woke up to see this symbol of oppression finally removed from the Loudoun County Courthouse, or rather from in front of the old Loudoun County Courthouse anyway, and that's that's the one that counts. It's very picturesque, and people take photos of it all the time, and with this Confederate statue in front, it's a bad look for a county that has changed in many ways. It's a bad look for counties that haven't changed too. She's pointing to the article from Louden Now, which I guess I'll include in the roundup, or at least I'll include her tweet, which links to the story. I don't think we need to tell you the localized story. It's nothing terribly amazing here, but it's a good illustration. And well, Greg had heard of it. It had made its way to Greg that this was placed by what do they call themselves? What they now call the United Daughters of the Confederacy, which I don't know. I don't know why they make a point of saying now they're the United Daughters. They used to be the Divided Daughters of the Confederacy, I guess. They were just the Daughters of the Confederacy. Now they're called the United Daughters of the Confederacy. And I guess just for the sake of accuracy, they point that out. Although, anyway, yes, they placed the statue, and this is a very interesting process that they went through to get it removed. Let's see. They also explain the background of the statue and how it was placed there. It's interesting to find out what the logistics were then, and now the logistics of saying, all right, if funds were privately raised for this thing and it was privately placed, well, for one thing, what are we doing giving up public space for it? And for another, if you claim to own it, then come and get it. And that won't be the case everywhere, and so it won't work the same way everywhere. But where it does, I guess if you do a little bit of research, a process can be settled on. And you know what? As a matter of fact, since we're coming up to the break, what the hell? We'll read it because it is kind of interesting, and we only have a few minutes left. We can't dive into anything larger anyway. We're going to get interrupted. So Loudoun's Confederate statue removed overnight. We are informed by this piece. The Confederate statue at the Loudoun County Courthouse was removed overnight by the Daughters of the Confederacy in coordination with the county government. The work, planned in secrecy, was completed without incident. This morning, only a portion of the concrete base remains, which might be an interesting thing to leave there. The monument was moved to storage. The Loudoun County Board of Supervisors voted unanimously on July 9th to affirm that the, quote, Silent Sentinel statue belonged to the Loudon chapter of the United Daughters of the Confederacy, and to allow them to remove the statue from public property. The organization requested the opportunity to remove the statue amid a growing national movement to take down memorials to Confederate leaders and soldiers. They acknowledged supervisors were likely to take the statue down after the General Assembly of Virginia this year granted localities the authority to alter or remove Confederate war memorials. The Daughters of the Confederacy, asserting that they own the statue since they raised the bulk of the money to put it up, that private claim allowed supervisors to avoid a lengthy public process to remove the monument. Instead, they essentially allowed the organization to come reclaim its property. The statue, the Silent Sentinel, and it's a mass-produced piece, I think, that lots of people raised money for to put in various places. It was commissioned by the Clinton Hatcher Camp Confederate Veterans and Sons, now the Clinton Hatcher Camp of the Sons of the Confederate Veterans, and the Loudon chapter of the Daughters of the Confederacy, now the United Daughters of the Confederacy, which began raising funds for the project as early as 1901. In 1906, the Board of Supervisors agreed to allocate $500 for the project as long as the sons and daughters raised the remaining $2,500, and the statue was formally unveiled in 1908 in the height of the Jim Crow era as Confederate monuments were going up across the South. So that's the entirety of the article, but explains the background nicely, and it might be a unique situation, but I suppose for any other localities facing the same situation. This poses a quiet and perhaps mutually acceptable solution. And the part that we're excited about here is that the thing is gone. And it's not a symbol of oppression standing as a silent sentinel in front of the courthouse. So what do you need a sentinel from the side that lost for anyway? If you ask me, the answer is you don't. All right, let's see. Other news. I did ask the other day about when we were going to hear news from the great deal maker about an American deal to secure doses of any vaccine that could be developed, since we heard that the UK had developed such a deal. And I saw it this morning. Bloomberg tweeting out breaking news. The U.S. enters a pact with Pfizer, otherwise known as Pfizer, for 100 million doses of a COVID-19 vaccine, which Americans will receive for free, which does sound like good news. Of course, who knows whether the thing ever materializes. It has this, because it sounds like such a good deal, it sounds like the sort of thing that Trump would announce, but there would be no substance behind it. That would be just one of many stupid announcements which there's no substance behind. As Bill keeps reminding us, there was that odd and oddly phrased pronouncement not that long ago that from Trump that something, I'll have to find his phrasing of it because I think Bill quotes him on that. But there was something, he was touting that in the next 8 weeks or something, we would be seeing, and there's all sorts of, the way he phrases everything is bizarre. I'm going to have to find it because it's just vintage Trump. And it wasn't that long ago that Bill sent it again and I retweeted it. But just this idea that there would be, here we are. He says in his tweet, don't forget that we have, time for our music here. Don't forget that we have seen 7 of the 8 weeks of, quote, many exciting things that nobody has even contemplated, thought possible, with levels of thought that a lot of people believe very strongly we didn't have in this country left. And we don't know what the hell that even is supposed to mean. Anyway, time for us to exit, and guess what? The piano is here, so good timing. At least 1 minute of it you'll miss out on, and you'll hear the rest after this. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Pardon me, the frog came in with the piano. I don't know if he plays. Anyway, I guess we got a couple minutes left on the move here, so you'll hear plenty of it. But at least the initial part of the initial minute was behind the muted microphone and the music. And let's see. Other things to catch up on. Let's see. We got a lot of stories we could dive into that are filed away in Pocket. I know I didn't fully read the other day, but I did note for the record, I guess because, we ran out of time the first time I noted it, but I was reminded of the Kansas story just because Greg had brought it back up. And if I can get the archives to come up here in Pocket, we can check back in on the story from out of Kansas that I didn't give as much time to as it deserved. And I know it's down here somewhere. I think we're getting into the neighborhood here. No, I felt like it was right around here, and now it's not coming up. Is this not the archive that I was looking for? Okay, yeah. Let me switch over. There it is. The 3 felony criminal charges against Congressman Steve Watkins, sort of a backbencher about whom we know very little here on the show, but this, now we know more. 3 felony charges filed against Steve Watkins from Tiffany Littler at the KSNT News, the NBC affiliate in Topeka. And let's see. Shawnee County District Attorney Mike Kagay, I don't know, that's Kagay, Kagay, announced Tuesday he's filed criminal charges, and this was July 14th, so it's a week or so ago. Filed criminal charges against Kansas Representative Steve Watkins. This follows an investigation by the Shawnee County Sheriff's Office. I wanted to get into the details in the story of what exactly it was he had been doing. I mentioned that it was pretty much outright voter fraud, but it's weird that that we didn't hear more about it. I guess just because he's such a nobody. But Kage, or Kage, I'm curious how he pronounces that, took over the investigation in April. From who, I don't know, but there's a link so you can find out. Watkins came under investigation by the Shawnee County Sheriff's Office after allegations that he listed a Topeka UPS store for his address when voting in the 2019 general election. I imagine they had statewide elections or something there in 2019. Not uncommon to have the off-year elections. The investigation was delayed significantly due to the coronavirus shutdown, but the office maintained constant contact with the sheriff's office and received regular updates on the gathering of documents and statements. Watkins is charged with 3 felonies and a misdemeanor that relate to the 2019 local election. There you go. Figure out what it is. I don't know what jobs were open there, but a local election. Here's the felonies. Well, it says he's charged with 3 felonies and a misdemeanor. So there are 4 bullet points here. I don't know which one is the misdemeanor, but maybe we can figure it out, the less serious sounding one. The first is interference with law enforcement and providing false information. That feels felonious. Voting without being qualified. Like, you're not supposed to vote in this district. You don't live here. But the UPS store is here. That's basically what he did. Unlawful advance voting also sounds felonious. And the fourth, which might be the misdemeanor, says listed last. Let's see. Failing to notify the DMV of a change of address. That feels more like a misdemeanor, don't you think? Sheriff Brian Hill released a statement last Tuesday night. In December of 2019, the Shawnee County Sheriff's Office began an investigation as to whether Congressman Steve Watkins had violated certain voting laws in Shawnee County, Kansas. Kris Kobach was not investigating this, by the way. After an investigation and review of documents and records from several sources, the investigative findings were submitted to the Shawnee County District Attorney for review. The charges filed by the District Attorney are reflective of the factual allegations that were discovered, that's a weird construction, by detectives during the course of this investigation, which was delayed due to the ongoing pandemic. As with all criminal cases, Mr. Watkins is innocent until proven guilty by a court or jury, which is also a weird way of saying that. But yeah, I suppose it's true. There are some places where you would not necessarily get a jury trial for that in certain situations. Certainly, I guess if he pleads guilty, then we wouldn't need a jury trial. Okay, first hearing scheduled for December 3rd. So he'll, I guess, be able to run for re-election before anybody finds out for sure whether he's really guilty of this terrible, terrible fraud. And it is, I mean, it's not the kind that Kobach is looking for. He's looking for Democratic fraud, of course, not Republican fraud. We can ignore that. But it's interesting that I guess the fantasy is that you'll catch somebody impersonating someone else and voting for them, or creating fake voter profiles and one person using the fake voter profiles to vote over and over again. But here in this case, I don't know what it was about this particular district that made Watkins want so badly to be able to vote there. I don't even know if they had a close election. Or maybe it was where he used to live, but he's moved and he wants to remain somehow connected to that local jurisdiction. So he just went out and faked it and said, my home address is a UPS store that's inside this district, and therefore I want to register to vote from there, even though I shouldn't be allowed to. I mean, it's pretty straight up voter fraud. I don't really know why he wanted to do it, but I'm sure he won't answer my questions about it anyway. But just wanted to get that on the record because we kind of glossed over it the other day. Now we can catch up with more current things. One that caught my eye, just because we talk about these kind of stats all the time. The Hill has a story by Marty Johnson here claiming in the headline that California passes New York for the most coronavirus cases, I guess, in total since the beginning of the pandemic. Now, they are obviously using a different source than Worldometers, which still has New York in the lead, I guess, if you want to use that terminology, with 435,753 total reported cases. California very close, 410,176. It's just that Worldometers tends to run a little bit ahead of most of the other providers of such statistics. And so it's a little surprising to see somebody else jumping out ahead of this. Third place, in case you're wondering, Florida, 369,000 plus, and then Texas at 357,000. Then a significant drop from there to some of the smaller states. New Jersey, 183,000. Illinois, 164,000. Georgia, 148,000. But you see the states that Greg mentioned as up-and-comers creeping up the list. It used to be, the tops of the list used to be all Northeast, with the late injection of Florida, California, Texas into the list. But so, yeah, after Illinois, Georgia, Arizona, Massachusetts, a legacy inclusion here, Pennsylvania, although Pennsylvania is still creeping up the list. Then North Carolina, Louisiana, which had an early, very severe breakout around Mardi Gras. And then Michigan, a legacy inclusion. And then up-and-comers like Tennessee. Virginia was in the first round of infections, trailing taking up the southernmost position of the northeastern corridor there. Then Maryland, its partner, and Ohio, South Carolina, Alabama, and then from then on, it's a little bit more randomized now. But very interesting. So let's see, what do they have by way of reporting from the Hill? Who's their source? California, they say, now has the most confirmed cases of COVID-19 in the U.S., surpassing New York State, the former epicenter of the coronavirus pandemic in the country. With over 10,000 new cases on Tuesday, the Golden State's total number of cases rose. They have 409,370, according to the Los Angeles Times COVID-19 database. New York State's coronavirus tracker lists its total number of cases to be at 408,181. Why? I don't know. But at least they're providing us with their sources and our links, and I guess if you really wanted to dig into it, you could go and find out what their methodology is and whether you value their stats over anyone else's. We'll take a look. Let's see. Other news. Oh, yeah. We haven't yet discussed this one. But this happened yesterday, and you all, I'm sure, took umbrage at it. Ocasio-Cortez, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, accosted by GOP lawmaker over remarks. She says about this, that kind of confrontation hasn't ever happened to me, and that's lucky. But I guess your luck ran out, and didn't take long. She's young yet. Mike Lillis reporting this one. You likely heard the story. Tensions flared, and I want to read it so that we can name and shame the perpetrator here. Tensions flared on Capitol Hill this week when a Republican lawmaker challenged Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on issues of crime and policing in an unusual and decidedly personal confrontation on the Capitol steps. I read about this one. It's Ted Yoho, who's an idiot, and, we've mentioned his name as being an idiot many times on the show. Apparently, though, he was coming down the steps on the east side of the Capitol on Monday, having just voted, when he approached Ocasio-Cortez, who was ascending into the building to cast a vote of her own, to which she is entitled. In a brief but heated exchange, which was overheard by a reporter, Yoho told Ocasio-Cortez she was, quote, disgusting. Now, it says here, for recently suggesting that poverty and unemployment are driving a spike in crime in New York City during the coronavirus pandemic. And I guess this is according to the reporter who overheard the exchange. I was wondering whether it might have been a confrontation over, apparently, who did this? One of the Fox News reporters was circulating, and he's since withdrawn it and apologized, circulating a fake, quote, a fake tweet from Ocasio-Cortez that likewise, I guess, I'm sure caused a lot of, umbrage among Republicans, and it was designed to, but it was fake, and I was wondering whether he was confronting her over that. This says here that she's being confronted over recently suggesting that poverty and unemployment are driving a spike in crime in New York City, which is, I don't know. I mean, I guess that's a real quote from her, and it's kind of probably right. And I'm not even certain what would make Ted Yoho say such a thing, except that Ted Yoho is a crazy a-hole. And that probably is the best explanation for it. And as a matter of fact, I noted Paul Waldman making note of this, saying he tweeted this morning, let's be honest, the right's obsession with AOC has an absolutely huge incel energy to it. It really does. And that combination of attraction and rage. When I heard about Ted Yoho, well, you should see, first I guess we should read the rest of the article. In case you haven't seen it, or the story, you'll be surprised. We shouldn't let Paul's tweet be the first you hear of it. In this, so he calls her disgusting, and then says, "You are out of your freaking mind," even though I don't see anything wrong with what she said. Ocasio-Cortez shot back, telling Yoho he was being rude, which, okay, seems fair. The two then parted ways, Ocasio-Cortez heading into the building, while Yoho, joined by Representative Roger Williams of Texas, began descending toward the House office building. A few steps down, though, Yoho offered a parting thought to no one in particular. I guess he just sort of muttered in the low tones, but overheard by the reporter, calling her, he didn't censor himself any, but here on the show we'll say, called her, just sort of mutters, effing bitch. What a loser. It's amazing. Ocasio-Cortez, a liberal firebrand and social media sensation, is no stranger to attacks from the right, but shortly after the exchange, she said it was the first time since she arrived in Congress that another lawmaker had challenged her so aggressively. That kind of confrontation hasn't ever happened to me, ever, she said. I've never had that kind of abrupt, disgusting kind of disrespect levied at me. Lucky at this stage of the game. Approached a few hours later, Yoho declined to discuss any aspect of the exchange. No comment. He said now he's got no comment. You see, Williams, who was in a position to hear the entire back and forth, said he wasn't paying it any mind, which is not really a good look for upstanding people in this society. I was actually thinking as I was walking down the stairs, I was thinking about some issues I've got in my district. Yeah, that's what I've been thinking. That need to get done. I don't know what their topic was. There's always a topic, isn't there? That's a pretty lame way of dismissing what actually happened here. I'm curious, but anyway, I guess we'll continue with Paul Waldman's tweet where he was saying, when I heard about Ted Yoho calling her an effing bitch, my first thought was, what, did she turn him down for a date? It really does have that kind of feel to it. And, we hear about that stuff all the time. And as it turns out, I guess we can segue to this. There was news, I didn't include it in yesterday's show, but there was news by yesterday, more news on the shooting of the family of the federal judge up in New Jersey. And as it turns out, the guy who did it is, well, for one thing, is an attorney in his own right. I mean, not a very good one, obviously, but apparently a bit of a wacko and somebody who's been treated as something of a curiosity in the past, but in fact was apparently a seething, dangerous murderer just getting ready to snap. He's apparently a men's rights attorney, men's rights activist, and attorney who I think became most famous for filing suit over the practice in some of the bars and restaurants all over the place of having ladies' nights where the ladies' drinks are lower priced than they are for men, and he figured this was unconstitutional discrimination based on gender and filed suit. Unbelievable, of course, but that made him a bit of a joke. But, of course, Fox News decided to have him on and to actually seriously make his case. So in case you're wondering about the upshot of this whole thing, yes, the guy who was seething with enough rage over quote-unquote men's rights issues to murder the family of a federal judge was, in fact, a repeat guest on Fox News. So just, figure that out for yourself, I guess. Anyway, maybe a little bit more detail in this Hill article about exactly what the comments were that they were discussing. Let's see, more about Ocasio-Cortez's background, which we don't need here, that we know already. Let's see, she stuck to that theme, suggesting that the surge in crime stems from the economic hardship facing New York's poorest communities and a failure of policymakers to fund programs aimed at leveling economic disparities. Crime is a problem of a diseased society, which neglects its marginalized people, she said during the July 9th event. Policing is not the solution to crime. Okay. Ocasio-Cortez went on to propose that the economic desperation caused by the coronavirus pandemic, combined with glitches in the delivery of federal stimulus checks and unemployment payments, has helped trigger the crime spike. Maybe this has to do with the fact that people aren't paying their rent and are scared to pay their rent, and so they go out and they need to feed their children and they don't have any money, she said. So they're put in a position where they feel like they either need to shoplift some bread or go hungry that night. Conservatives pounced, accusing Ocasio-Cortez of propounding tortured rationales to excuse violent crime. There's a big difference between shoplifting and cold-blooded murder, and for her not to know the difference is frankly astonishing. Former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee said last week on Fox News. But is it murder that was spiking, or was it shoplifting that was spiking? I don't know. On Monday, Ocasio-Cortez defended her position, saying she made clear during the town hall that she was referring to petty crime and crimes of poverty. Conservative media, she said, has purposefully taken her comments out of context. I say, listen, I'm not talking about violent crime. I'm not talking about shootings. But when it comes to petty theft, a lot of these crimes are poverty and people are desperate. She said, so the right wing cuts up this clip, per usual, in a very misleading way. They basically want to make it seem as though I'm saying people are shooting each other because they're hungry, which may also happen, but I don't know. Ocasio-Cortez acknowledged that her outspoken advocacy of liberal policies has made her an easy target of conservatives. Obviously, I'm no stranger to this, but the confrontation with Yoho was something new. In all these intense news cycles, I've never, ever been treated that way by another member before. She said, I'm frankly quite taken aback. And quite honestly, he should be censured for it. And they've got the votes to do it. And it'll be interesting to see whether Ocasio-Cortez bothers to press for it. She could have it, but she might. I don't know. I wonder if she would consider it rising above to simply let it stand as is. Okay. Let's see other stories to share with you this morning. There are many, and many more complex one. I guess the biggest shocker for me in terms of like, oh my God, he's doing it again, would be the story reported by the New York Times, which we can share here as the piano moves further and further into the house here. This one was really kind of amazing, except, well, no pun intended because it involves golf, but par for the course. New York Times, Mark Landler, Lara Jakes, and Maggie Haberman teaming up for this one. Trump's request of an ambassador. That will be our own ambassador to the UK. Get the British Open for me. Not tickets to the British Open, but the British Open. Long story short here, as I've gleaned from this, is that he put Woody Johnson, the owner of the New York Jets, with whom he's friendly and who was a major campaign donor for him, and appointed him as ambassador to the UK, and he immediately began leaning on him. Listen, what I want you to do for me here in your official capacity is I want you to lean on the British government to the extent that I don't even know what kind of involvement the British government has in such decision-making. But I want you to lean on the British government, because that's who you lean on as an ambassador, to locate, to cite the British Open at my Trump golf resort in Scotland. And I guess this is their major effort, because nothing else that I know of going on as between the U.S. and the U.K. of substance. Woody Johnson, the NFL owner, Trump donor, and ambassador to Britain, was warned not to get involved in trying to move the tournament to a Trump resort in Scotland, but he raised the idea anyway, and he failed. So here's the reporting. The American ambassador to Britain, Robert Wood Johnson IV, told multiple colleagues, I thought that... So he's I thought, okay, it is him. Okay, I'm confused now. Robert Wood Johnson, big name in New Jersey, as a matter of fact. But I got, that's Woody Johnson, Robert Wood Johnson IV. I got you now. I got confused by these rich people and their nicknames. So the ambassador, Robert Wood Johnson IV, told multiple colleagues in February of 2018 that President Trump had asked him to see if the British government could help steer the world-famous and lucrative British Open golf tournament to the Trump Turnberry Resort in Scotland, according to 3 people with knowledge of the episode. By the way, not terribly far-fetched in the sense of using Turnberry. It's a prestigious enough course. It's just never hosted anything like that, pardon me, since Trump has owned it. And of course, you're not supposed to use official resources to enhance your business holdings. But okay. The ambassador's deputy, Louis A. Lukens, advised him not to do it, warning that it would be an unethical use of the presidency for private gain. Yes, it would be, these people said. But Mr. Johnson apparently felt pressured to try. Wow, how could that have happened? A few weeks later, he raised the idea of Turnberry playing host to the Open with the Secretary of State for Scotland, David Mundell. In a brief interview last week, Mr. Mundell said it was inappropriate for him to discuss his dealings with Mr. Johnson and referred to a British government statement that said Mr. Johnson made no request of Mr. Mundell regarding the British Open or any other sporting event. The statement did not address whether the ambassador had broached the issue of Turnberry, which Mr. Trump bought in 2014, but none of the next 4 Opens are scheduled to be played there. Still, the episode left Mr. Lukens and other diplomats deeply unsettled. Mr. Lukens, who served as the acting ambassador for Mr. Johnson before Mr. Johnson arrived in November of 2017, emailed officials at the State Department to tell them what had happened, colleagues said. So another panicked cable, not this time from Ukraine or somewhere in Eastern Europe, but from the UK. Still, the episode left Mr. Lukens and other diplomats deeply unsettled. Mr. Lukens, who served as the acting ambassador before Mr. Johnson arrived in November of 2017, emailed officials at the State Department to tell them what had happened, colleagues said. A few months later, Mr. Johnson forced out Mr. Lukens, there's the piano, a career diplomat who had earlier served as ambassador to Senegal shortly before his term was to end. Sounds like I'm at a piano convention, as a matter of fact, rather than just one piano being moved in here. The White House declined to comment on Mr. Trump's instructions to Mr. Johnson, as did the ambassador and the State Department. Although Mr. Trump, as president, is exempt from a federal conflict of interest law that makes it a criminal offense to take part in government matters that will affect your own personal financial interest, probably a bad idea, the Constitution prohibits federal officials from accepting gifts or, emoluments from foreign governments. Experts on government ethics pointed to one potential violation of the emoluments clause that may have been triggered by the president's actions. The British or Scottish governments would most likely have to pay for security at the tournament, an event that would profit Mr. Trump. It was not the first time the president tried to steer business to one of his properties. Last year, the White House chose the Trump National Doral Resort in Miami as the site of a Group of 7 meeting. Mr. Trump backed off it after it ignited a political storm, moving the meeting to Camp David before canceling it because of the coronavirus pandemic. Mr. Trump also urged Vice President Mike Pence to stay at his family's golf resort in Doonbeg, Ireland last year during a visit, even though the vice president's official business was on the other side of the country. That trip generated headlines for the golf club, but also controversy. And Mr. Trump has visited his family-owned golf courses more than 275 times since he took office, bringing reporters with him each time, ensuring that the golf resorts get ample news coverage. The Trump International Hotel in Washington has done a brisk trade in guests, foreign and domestic, who are in town to lobby the federal government. Turnberry itself drew attention when the Pentagon acknowledged it had been sending troops to the resort while they were on overnight layovers at the nearby Glasgow Prestwick Airport. But Mr. Trump and his children have struggled for more than a decade to attract professional golf tournaments to the family's 16 golf courses, knowing that those events draw global television audiences and help drive traffic. They own most of the courses outright, as opposed to simply selling the family name, as is the case with several of their hotels and residential towers, and the courses generate about a third of the family's revenue, with tournaments seen as a crucial way to publicize them. This has been particularly important for the 2 Trump resorts in Scotland and 1 in Ireland, which have been losing money under Mr. Trump's ownership. Mr. Trump himself was intensely involved in promoting them before he was elected, regularly pushing golf writers and the editors of golf magazines to play with him, often after whisking them to Scotland on his private jet. The losses at the British resorts have come even after the family made costly investments to build or upgrade their courses, including $150 million at Turnberry. The most recent annual report for Turnberry shows it lost nearly $1 million on $19 million in sales in 2018. But the campaign to recruit tournaments has been complicated by Mr. Trump's political ascent. Executives who run the Scottish Open, for example, said in 2017 that they would most likely not hold the tournament at Trump's family's Aberdeen golf resort, even after direct appeals by Mr. Trump. Direct appeals? Politics aside, Trump would be an ideal venue. But you can't put politics aside. Martin Gilbert, the chief executive of Aberdeen Asset Management, which is the lead sponsor of the Scottish Open, told reporters. As ambassador, Mr. Johnson has had to navigate Mr. Trump's up and down relations with British leaders. The president soured on the prime minister at the time, Theresa May, and berated her on transatlantic phone calls. His relations with Prime Minister Boris Johnson, a like-minded populist, have been warmer, though Mr. Johnson has sometimes steered clear of Mr. Trump, who is deeply unpopular in Britain. We'll be right back. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I think we're done. Piano's in, and although now what's happening? Now someone is like next door sanding the walls with a belt sander, apparently, so that'll interrupt things for a little bit too. All right, we're gonna have to ignore the rest of the noises going on here. More about Johnson, the Republican donor and ambassador to Britain. A prominent Republican donor, Ambassador Johnson initially supported Jeb Bush for the Republican nomination in 2016, but he later backed Mr. Trump, introducing him to other figures in the party's money circles. Enlisting Mr. Johnson as an emissary on behalf of his golf course was another way the president was looking to help furthering his financial interests. Beyond the legal and ethical red flags, asking for such a favor from his host country would put Mr. Johnson in an untenable position as emissary of the United States. It is diplomatic malpractice, because once you do that, you put yourself in a compromised position, said Norman Eisen, who served as President Barack Obama's special counsel for ethics and later as his ambassador to the Czech Republic. They can always say, remember the time when you made that suggestion? No experienced diplomat would do that. For Mr. Johnson, 73, London was a reward fit for the billionaire heir to the Johnson & Johnson pharmaceutical fortune. Formerly known as the Court of St. James, the assignment is the plum of the diplomatic corps, one that comes with a palatial residence, Winfield House, and entry, I guess is how you would pronounce it in this case, entry to the highest levels of British society. It's spelled like entree, like on a menu, but I suppose it's a different, I hope it's a different pronunciation. I don't know. Who cares? Anyway, the point is that we're moving on, and there's annoying vibrations coming through the wall. So we'll just pay attention to that instead. You want to listen? Pretty fun, right? Like many political appointees, Mr. Johnson had no diplomatic experience before arriving in London. That happens, true. Affable and well-connected, he is known mainly for the nickname Woody and his ownership of the New York Jets. That's now that's a bigger thing. Owning the New York Jets is a bigger deal. But known, it's not that he's. This is how it's written. I might have understood if they had said he is known chiefly by the nickname Woody. But he's known mainly for the nickname Woody. Like, everyone knows that guy. He's got the nickname Woody. I've never really heard it put that way. And the ownership of the New York Jets, a perennially struggling NFL franchise. His transition to leading a large embassy was bumpy. Mr. Johnson's throwback style has been criticized as offensive. There have been complaints that he complimented the appearances of female employees during staff meetings. That's a throwback style, you see. Some way of putting it. And after interviewing a candidate to replace Mr. Lukens as deputy chief of mission, he asked a colleague whether she was Jewish. I'm not sure what he was trying to get at there, but I suppose that it could be viewed poorly to do so. The ambassador, colleagues said, forced out Mr. Lukens after hearing he gave a speech at a British university in which he told a positive anecdote about a visit Mr. Obama had made to Senegal in 2013 when Mr. Lukens was the envoy. And that's pretty amazing, too. And I imagine that it must have gotten back to Trump that he did that, and Trump leaned on Johnson to get rid of him, because, honestly, who would be disturbed by that? It wasn't a negative anecdote about Trump. It was a positive anecdote about Obama, and we can't have that. That's how petty these guys are. At least some of these complaints were raised with the department's Office of the Inspector General last fall, when a team of investigators began a routine review of diplomatic operations at the embassy. The findings were submitted in February, and the complaints are expected to be included, according to one of the investigators. It is not clear why the review has not been made public, although I think we can all guess. Neither the State Department nor the embassy addressed the accusations, but the department said Mr. Johnson had led the embassy honorably and professionally, which is not true. In a statement, it said, "We stand by Ambassador Johnson and look forward to him continuing to ensure our special relationship with the UK is strong. Strongly strong, one might say." As for Trump's request for help in getting the Open, it's not clear how much sway the British government would have even had if it responded to Mr. Johnson's hints. The tournament is run by the RNA, the Royal and Ancient Golf Club in St. Andrews, which is the British counterpart to the United States Golf Association. A spokesman for the RNA, Mike Woodcock, said a committee selects the site from a pool of 10 courses in Scotland, England, and Northern Ireland, based on factors like the readiness of the course and public infrastructure. We haven't received any approaches from the British government or the Scottish government about this, he said. So, probably misunderstood the dynamics to begin with, but also said, let's get corrupt. And Donald Trump couldn't help himself, and it's fairly ridiculous. And but who cares, right? There's no emoluments clause in the Constitution, so never mind. LOL, YOLO, no one cares, nothing matters. When it comes to legal issues, that's just still pretty much the truth. Let's see. I can jump from here over to Greg Sargent tweeting about his article from yesterday and then offering it up to us for review, saying this is kind of an interesting thing. What's happening here, basically drawing a parallel between what's happening in Portland and what had happened surrounding Ukraine, for which the president was recently impeached. He puts it this way: Trump is using law enforcement to manufacture a campaign lie about Biden. He told us so himself, straight from the Oval Office. This is what got him impeached: manipulating government to invent Biden smears. In both cases, his own TV ads confirm the point. And he makes a mini thread out of it here before we head over to his article. Here's a great point from the former DHS official Juliette Kayyem, saying there's zero operational justification for Trump's use of federal law enforcement this way, that is in Portland. This is especially true given that state and local officials are opposed to what Trump is doing. Another point, not enough is being made of the fact that Trump explicitly said the cities are getting targeted by federal law enforcement because they're all run by Democrats. As Ann Applebaum says, this is performative authoritarianism. It's also self-damning. So let's take a look at what Greg wrote up here. Once again, Trump says the corrupt part out loud. His column from yesterday: it is a paradox of the Trump era, precisely because the president often unabashedly displays corrupt or sordid motives in broad daylight, and even on national television, we sometimes fail to give the admissions themselves the attention they deserve. So it is with Trump's new vow to send federal law enforcement into numerous cities against the will of Democratic officials in them. And forget that they're Democratic, it's just the local elected officials. We should just emphasize that. Which comes after federal agents already invaded Portland in defiance of the city's mayor and the governor of Oregon. In the course of announcing that more federal law enforcement will be descending on cities like Chicago while hailing enforcement efforts to grab people in Portland, Trump quickly segued into a claim about the presidential race. If Joe Biden gets elected, Trump says, the whole country would go to hell, and we're not going to let it go to hell. We're going to carry it there in a sedan chair. Trump just said it straight from the Oval Office. This is all about Biden. At around that time, Trump's eldest son tweeted out a Trump campaign ad that depicts a terrified elderly woman calling 911 about an intruder while falsely claiming Biden would defund the police. The political messaging is seamlessly connected to President Trump's claims about Biden in the White House while announcing the new law enforcement actions. If this sounds familiar, recall this. Even as Trump was being impeached for manipulating national security policy to strong-arm a foreign leader into validating his smear of Biden, Trump launched a $10 million ad campaign that enshrined that very same false narrative. Trump's deployment of federal law enforcement, which it really isn't even, but okay, into Democratic-led cities is every bit as devoted to manufacturing and sustaining a campaign attack on Biden as his manipulation of national security policy in Ukraine was. The new ad on Biden, approved by Trump himself, says the corrupt part out loud, just as he did in the White House. In both these cases, the ads were and are the message. The story that Trump is employing federal national security and law enforcement resources to manufacture into being. That is pretty amazing. A former official here, here's Juliette Kayyem's part in all this. No operational justification. One way to underscore this point is to ask, what is the operational justification for what Trump is doing right now? Is there one? Juliette Kayyem, a former senior Homeland Security official, told me there's a big tell here. In cases like this, federal officials would ordinarily be trying to coordinate with local officials, precisely because that would make it more likely such efforts would succeed at their stated objective. In this case, though, they are pursuing the policy in defiance of local officials. We've already seen this in Portland, Oregon. Now it's happening again. Homeland Security officials are reportedly making plans to send federal law enforcement to Chicago, even though Chicago's mayor stated unequivocally she doesn't want this. Meanwhile, Trump also named Detroit as a potential future target, even though the city's mayor and governor of Michigan both oppose such action. The Department of Homeland Security reportedly has 2,000 law enforcement officials, many drawn from immigration enforcement, on standby for such deployment, which I guess just leaves the border undefended. But screw that, he doesn't care about that either. Kayyem noted that it's clearly not true, as an empirical matter, that civil unrest in these cities necessitates federal law enforcement. This is underscored, she added, by the fact that local officials aren't even seeking the deployment of federal assets. But crucially, Kayyem pointed out that doing this without local assent will make it less likely that such operations accomplish their stated goal. Even with consent, local, state, and federal integration is often very complicated and is sometimes unsuccessful, Kayyem told me. Without consent, the federal impact is either going to be insignificant or dangerous. The stated justification for going into Chicago is not even protests. The plans are reportedly for federal law enforcement to assist against drug trafficking and gangs. And meanwhile, the only gang here is, of course, the one being dispatched by Trump here, MS-45, as I've taken to calling it. We wonder how they're getting into the country, and we have to stop their caravans from invading our cities. But no, apparently not. Of no interest to anyone else, even the people combating gang violence here. We're just talking about straight-up warlordism here. But if anything, this further underscores the ad hoc justification, we're told. Why now? Particularly since this is in defiance of local officials. Local officials will tell you if they need help with drug trafficking and gangs. They don't. The administration can't even get its story straight, showing there is no federal plan, Kayyem told me. In Portland, it's courts and statues. In Chicago, it's apparently drugs. In other cities, in the words of our president, it's who knows. Apparently that's it. Who knows? We don't even have to say. You don't have to tell anybody why you're going. The broader point here, as Ryan Goodman and Danielle Shulkin explain, is that the administration is working to develop a playbook for using federal forces without state consent. As they note, this may be legally dubious and is certainly strains historical precedent. Beyond this, Trump himself is confirming the truly corrupt nature of what his administration is doing. He himself is demonstrating that there's no genuine rationale for it other than his re-election needs. Here again, Trump said the damning part out loud. The same president who sent troops to the border as a campaign prop in 2018 has now explicitly said the cities being targeted by law enforcement are, quote, all run by Democrats. That edges right up there to saying this is one of his own stated criteria for making the decision. And Applebaum calls this performative authoritarianism, and indeed, the imagery it is creating is already being pushed very hard by his propagandists. And a couple of tweets here from Media Matters' Matthew Gertz documenting their work on this, mostly through Sean Hannity. All this is being acknowledged in some media reports with euphemisms such as, quote, the policy closely mirrored the politics, unquote. But that badly undersells what's really happening here. Until we hear a serious justification to the contrary, it is clear the policy is entirely about manufacturing imagery that is supposed to sustain Trump's presidential run, which is what Trump got impeached for. Very good point. Took a while to get around to it, but a very good point. Meanwhile, at the same time, I happened to see on Twitter here, let's see, who is this? Jesse Lerich. Jesse Lerich is who? Co-founder of Accountable Tech, trying to make the internet less bad and more truthy. That's good news. Former foreign policy spokesman for Hillary Clinton, and he is in Chicago. And he puts it this way. He starts with LOL. I don't think it's so much of an L-ing matter, quite honestly. But the thing he's laughing about is a new Trump ad warning of chaos and violence if Biden wins. Depicts a cop being attacked by protesters. Only it's a picture from Kyiv. You remember, that's how we now pronounce Kiev, right? Kyiv in 2014, when Yanukovych's thugs fought to quash a democratic uprising. Very interesting. And then, of course, it's pointed out on top of this by Jim Scuto, who's a CNN anchor, right? Jim Scuto pointing out, and by the way, who was lobbying for Yanukovych as he did this, as he perpetrated this crackdown? And the answer is Paul Manafort. I wonder if that's where they got the photos from. But it is very interesting to note, one, that he uses a picture of state police being attacked by democratic demonstrators rising up against a dictatorial regime, Yanukovych, and two, that it would be from Ukraine, of all places, connecting those two issue areas that Greg Sargent was just at pains to connect, but he did a fine job in making the connection. But we'll share, I guess we can share that tweet with you afterwards, and now you can hold them up side by side. I didn't see how they faked up the clip. This isn't the first time that Trump puts out. Trump's ad people are very, very careless with the provenance of their imagery. I mean, remember actually back in like the 2016 campaign, there was something in which they were, I don't know, I forget exactly what they were doing, but they were they wanted to do something about, honoring our troops or whatever, and they put pictures of German troops from World War II in there. I guess because their formation was nice and tight, and Trump loves that sort of military imagery. I don't know, very weird. It's not the first time that he's made such errors. If they are errors, I mean, maybe he did want to honor those troops. Anyway, let's see. A couple of other things that we could probably note for the record. Very weird story, since we were talking about Maxwell, whatever her name is. This possibly entirely fake story came to light yesterday, and by entirely fake, I mean it involves Jacob Wohl, which means, could mean anything. But it was being reported in the Daily Mail, which is also probably just generally not to be believed about such things, that Gilliam Maxwell, however she's pronouncing the name now, paid, it says, $25,000 to fake news purveyor Jacob Wohl to smear Epstein victims And to get prosecutor, this is the big news, to get prosecutor Jeffrey Berman, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, to get Berman fired in an attempt to stall sex trafficking investigations against her. Well, that didn't work, although Berman did, of course, get fired. It just didn't stop the charges. But as we circulated this story, others began to chime in and remind us, well, there's every chance in the world that Jacob Wohl made this whole thing up and just planted it in the news to get himself in the papers again. Although it would be an awfully dumb thing for Jacob Wohl, who's a pretty big Trump supporter. It would be an awfully dumb thing for him to do. And he does dumb things like this all the time, to choose to plant a story that made it look like child sex trafficker Ghislaine, or whatever she calls herself, Maxwell, was trying to get Trump to fire Jeffrey Berman to help her out, and that the Epstein operation was behind the firing of Jeffrey Berman, when they had, well, for one thing, Trump had his own reasons, cover-up reasons, for trying to push Berman out. Also, there was word at some point that perhaps it was aimed at stopping investigations into Rudy Giuliani, and I'm sure that there were lots of birds that they could get with this one stone. But for Jacob Wohl to think it was somehow strategic and pro-Trump to make the story be about Jeffrey Epstein posthumously forcing Jeff Berman out of the Southern District of New York, I can't really explain, except that Wohl is extraordinarily stupid. But yeah, the details of the story are such that it could very easily just have been Wohl and his partner Jack Berkman making the whole thing up, as they usually make everything up, and planting that story, and the Daily Mail didn't know any better and decided to go with it. I don't know. Might be true, might be a complete fabrication. Just thought I'd bring it to your attention anyway in the last couple minutes of the show. Another item of some note yesterday, and because we missed our chance to talk with Joan McCarter yesterday, I'll at least grab her tweet taking note of, this must have been extraordinarily interesting to her. She's asking here, who do you root for in the contest between the Freedom Caucus maniacs and Liz Cheney? Breaking into the news yesterday, thanks to the reporting of Melanie Zanona, a reporter for Politico. She got word of the fight that took place in the Republican conference meeting yesterday, reporting this way. We'll just read her thread. Things getting heated at House GOP conference meeting right now. Matt Gaetz and Thomas Massie both got on the mics and went after Liz Cheney, remember she is the conference chair now, for backing Massie's primary opponent, per a source in the room. That would be rather unusual for the GOP, the GOP conference chair, to back a primary opponent to a sitting Republican member. So I guess they were understandably taken aback by this, but then, of course, the attack becomes dumb enough to become newsworthy. Let's see. She continues on to say, now Representative Chip Roy is attacking Cheney for her support of Dr. Fauci, per a source in the room. He lamented that his liberal primary opponent, are they liberal? I don't think so, retweeted Cheney's tweet about Fauci. So Fauci's supported by Cheney. His primary opponent retweeted Cheney, and so therefore something. I guess Chip Roy is saying, you're giving ammunition to my primary opponent. That's a much less specific complaint than the idea of Cheney backing Massie's primary opponent directly. But okay, you could see people wanting to air grievances about this. Let's see. Now, Representatives Louie Gohmert and Andy Biggs also got on the mics to defend Massie and express their concerns. Biggs even accused Cheney of undermining their ability to win back the House, which they didn't really have, and said, if you don't have something nice to say about Trump, then don't say it at all. According to another source, it sounds like this conference meeting, the first in-person Republican meeting in months, is turning into a full-blown Freedom Caucus venting session / pile-on. Now, Jim Jordan is laying into Cheney for all the time she has broken with Trump and has started listing them off. So he keeps notes, apparently. No notes on his athletes being assaulted by the team doctor, of course, but notes on this in defense of Donald Trump. He said it'd be better if their conference chair helped Trump instead of going after him. Cheney, though, did not back down from confrontation. She defended Fauci. She told Gaetz, I look forward to seeing your HBO documentary. And I'm not even certain what that's about, but obviously she's taking a jab at him. She told Massey his issue is with Trump and not with her. She told Jordan, I look forward to hearing your comments about being a team player, and he knows about that, when we're back in the majority. Well, they won't be, but it was an interesting point nonetheless. So, the upshot of that, of course, Democrats in disarray. That's the only way you're allowed to report this news. Yes, okay, so I'll include for you, at least in the roundup, this Daily Beast article connecting the shooter of the judge's family in New Jersey to the men's rights movement. And by way of just, giving you something to read on that, and it's not just me saying so. Let's see. There's also the news that felony charges have been filed against the weirdo St. Louis couple who pointed their guns at the Black Lives Matter protesters. The city prosecutor is saying it's illegal to wave weapons in a threatening manner, and so charges will be brought. This being reported by the New York Times. Felony charges against the couple who pointed guns at protesters marching past their home last month in an episode that was captured on video and drew the attention of a divided nation, including President Trump, who I'm sure will try and step in and pardon them, but these are local and state charges, so it won't work. But he may try anyway. The couple, Mark and Patricia McCloskey, were charged on Monday by the Circuit Attorney's Office in St. Louis. I know people would prefer, I think, if I said it that way. But anyway, with unlawful use of a weapon, exhibiting. That's unlawful use of a weapon, exhibiting. The charge is a Class E felony that carries a possible penalty of up to 4 years in prison. The circuit attorney in St. Louis, Kimberly M. Gardner, said the couple created a dangerous situation involving peaceful, unarmed protesters. It is illegal to wave weapons in a threatening manner at those participating in nonviolent protest, she said in a statement. Gardner is a Democrat, by the way, and said she would not seek jail time for the couple were they to be convicted, but rather would seek to place them in a diversion program like community service, which, White Lives Matter. And we're not for the carceral state, et cetera, but sometimes you think it might be of some use to give people a taste of their own medicine, but perhaps not. Okay, so I just wanted to kind of note for the record that happened. That doesn't feel like the sort of article that we have to read all the way through. I'll wait for the results on that one. Let's see, other things to share with you. Let's see. Got a couple. I mentioned that there was, this again, we'll include the article for you, about Republican chairs tearing their hair out about Trump's smack talk about mail-in voting. And let's see, anything else that we can fit in? Well, we're really right up against the time limit here and almost time to hand things over. Perhaps I can share this thing, that another of Patrick Snyder's catches via Twitter, heading back to coronavirus, a interesting place to wrap it up. Makes sense. Sending us the tweet thread from Tyler Black MD, who says this: I want to spend a moment to put the death reports today, this would have been July 18th, a few days ago, death reports in Arizona into perspective. This is an interesting area of study. As a suicidologist, I study mortality on a regular basis. He studies the phenomenon of suicide, obviously. He said today, back on the 18th, 147 deaths were reported due to COVID-19 in Arizona. And, some news about exactly where that puts us. Let's see. I got to get ready for our exit here. But 147 deaths. Arizona set the record for suicides in 2018 with 1,438 suicides. Each suicide, understandably, a tragedy of human loss, but it works out to about 4 suicides a day. The COVID deaths reported today, 37 times the rate of suicides in Arizona, but it gets much, much worse. And then he displays a graph here of the top causes of death in Arizona as expressed in deaths per day. That would be the yearly rate divided by 365. Heart disease is number 1, 34 deaths a day. Cancer, 33. Accidents, 12. Chronic respiratory illness, 10, etc., etc. But if you add in today's 147 deaths in Arizona from COVID, well, of course, it dwarfs everything else. Now, they're not losing 147 a day all year round, but it was interesting to see in a snapshot, a perspective. In fact, he says, look what happens when I take the top 15 causes of death in Arizona and add them together. It still only adds up to 130 deaths a day versus the 147 they reported due to COVID-19 the other day. So pretty amazing. In total, 162 deaths per day from all causes all year long in Arizona on any given day. COVID-19, therefore, equivalent to the total number of deaths per day due to all other causes of death. It's kind of out of hand there. Time now, though, to turn things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. We'll see what he's got on tap for you that we didn't cover today, or maybe things that we did. Let's see. A third soldier's body. This is amazing. Found near Fort Hood this month. And, wow, they have to get to the bottom of this thing. This is really rather amazing. I didn't realize that there was a
From
third.
Daily Co's Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show.
With David Waldman.
Still more, of course. Let's see. After passing for 59 straight years, Trump threatened to veto this year's Defense Authorization Act, objecting to provisions he sees as curbing his absolute authority. Wow. Well, we'll see whether he has the gumption to actually do it and whether it's really going to be about Confederate generals or not in the days to come. We'll see you tomorrow.